And I am going to make sure my audio is doing what it's supposed to do. That looks true. So just finding a nice, comfy spot where we can settle in. I have a pretty hip focused plan this morning. Nice to see you guys. Feeling into each cycle of breath here. Just finding your way into something that feels comfortable and like it offers you a supportive start. And then let's utilize an inhale to bring both knees into a bent position so the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling. And then keep the right knee where it is and let the left knee fall out wide. So we have a little half external rotation of the hips here. Really want that open leg to be at ease. But we also want to think about how we can maintain more neutrality across the sacrum. And so just think if there may be a tweak or an adjustment that you could offer that would provide a little more neutral hip landing. Oftentimes that's a little bit of core engagement. It might be a little bit of like full torso torsion towards that right side. Whatever the choice is, we're looking for it to be the least amount of activity required to make that adjustment. Let's just give ourselves 30 more seconds here on this first side. And we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Or our knee back to neutral, mirroring that right side. And then the right side's going to fall out wide. Pretty likely that you're going to have a different sensation on the second side than you had on the first side. And pretty likely that the adjustment necessary to balance the hips is going to be different, either in intensity or location. But just thinking about balancing the dispersal of weight across the sacrum. Letting that right hip fall into some ease here. And last about 20 seconds here on the second side. Not losing sight or awareness of that balanced sacrum desire. And we'll bring our right knee back to neutral so that both knees can point towards the ceiling. Let's pull both thighs in towards the rib cage. Give yourself a little squeeze here. This can be shins or hamstrings, maybe the lateral edge of the hips, whatever feels best for you. Getting that compressive quality. Let's let the feet come back down to the mat and the knees fall to one side or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate. And we'll press ourselves up into seat. Extend our legs out in front of us and just follow that leg extension into a little forward fold, thinking about that place where you're linked up, the maximum benefit from your fold and the maximum depth of your fold, maybe the cross of the axis there, where you are not limiting the benefit for the benefit or for the exaggeration of depth, and you're not limiting the depth or the or in preventing that maximum benefit. Really finding the balance. This is a better way to say that. Finding the balance of forward movement and knee bend so that you maximize the benefit of this little fold. Let's give ourselves just let's hang out here for another 15 seconds. And we'll walk ourselves back up towards staff. Flip the torso to hands and knees tabletop. And from tabletop, let's take our hands out just a little bit wider than we'd normally have them, and then bring the knees in just a little bit tighter than we'd normally have them. Maybe you bring the knees all the way in so that the inner thighs are touching, but just a little bit thinner hip alignment is what we're looking for. And then let's start to add some way to our hips here. Little opportunity to play with this lateral movement. Oh, kind of a different way that we can explore the hip flexors here. Generally, hip flexors are explored by putting them under tension, and in some ways we're putting them under tension here, but this isn't out of our traditional range of motion. It's just we've narrowed the stance a little bit so we can get to that end range a little quicker. And then we'll bring our Tailbone back to neutral. Curl our toes, and let's roll our way back into down dog. This will be as active as we'll get today. Yeah, this will be as active as we'll get today. So we're just thinking about exploring the pedaling here. Use this to get out any kind of residual energy that you might want to release before we really slow things down. And then when you feel appropriate, let's come back down to hands and knees tabletop. We'll sink back into child's pose. Settle our way into child's pose here this morning. Just a reminder that whatever we use as the upper anchor, right? Whether it's our hands, our elbows, our forehead, that's going to be a determining factor in where this shape is received. And so if you are looking for more of that upper back, more of that upper shoulder expansion, hands planted and firmly peeling back away from that hand anchor is great. If you're looking for more of that lower back expansion, make sure that if you're using your head as the anchor there, right? Because we're not using our hands as the anchor to get into the lower back. If we're using the head as the anchor, we want to make sure that it's not preventing the capacity for the hips to fully get back into the shape. So if we're looking for low back expansion, we need to ensure that the hips are fully compressed in that anterior capsule and that the tailbone can sink as far back towards the back of the mat as is possible. And then to accentuate that lumbar expansion, a little core squeeze always does the trick. Let's pull ourselves back to hands and knees tabletop. We're going to grab our blanket or towel, and a shelf fold will be perfect. We'll put that kind of on the left side, middle of the mat, roughly hip height. We're headed towards a half frog. So from tabletop, we're just going to lower ourselves down to our belly. And then our left knee is going to come out towards our blanket, our towel. Very similar principle to how we were on our back. However, the sacrum balancing can require a lot more work here because we are neutral against our anterior space. So as you settle into this shape, hands can stack, forehead can come down. You can choose whether you want to include the cervical spine in rotation by taking the gaze over towards the right, your left ear down, or you can soften the shape a little bit by right ear down, gazing towards the left. But think about that same couple of options, few options for balancing the distribution of energy now across the sacrum. Imagine there's a cup of tea filled to the brim resting on your tailbone, and you need to ensure that not a drop of that tea is spilled. And so there is this little seaside village. And in this village lives a tailor. And not the tailor from last week's story who became a musical superstar. This tailor makes clothes. And so he's always been a remarkably gifted artist, remarkably gifted creator. And so he's always been relatively successful. He's also always been remarkably indecisive. He'll spend countless hours thumbing through fabric catalogs, fretting over which colors to bring in and how much, fretting over which styles of lace are going to be the most popular in the upcoming season. And so, way more time than he would like is spent kind of dreading the act of making decisions. We're going to give ourselves about 45 more seconds here on this first side. And when it feels appropriate, we'll extend that left leg down the mat. Let our hips balance. Slide our elbows underneath our shoulders for Sphinx. And here, play with the appropriate width of your hips so that you get the most benefit. Palms down and active, and then adjust your head so that the lumbar receives benefit, so that the lumbar feels easy. There is no compression. There is no I would say discomfort is the appropriate word. Like, we're looking to remove the sensation of discomfort in the low back. So the head drops until that's true. And then you can start to actively pull from the fingertips back towards the elbow crease to start getting that length. And there's sensation with length, but it should not be discomfort. It should be awareness, more or less. And we're going to give ourselves just about 30 more seconds here. And as it feels appropriate, we'll reach over, we'll connect to our blanket or towel. We'll move that over to the right side. We're going to take our right knee out to that half frog position, lower ourselves down onto resting stacked hands, rotating the head towards the left or right, depending on what feels the best and most appropriate for you this morning. Awareness on that sacral balance. Really focused on staying neutral across the hips, even with the asymmetry and that exaggerated external rotation. We've got 45 more seconds here on the second side. And as it feels appropriate, we'll slide our elbows back underneath our shoulders. We'll extend that right leg so that it mirrors the left. We're coming back to Sphinx. This time we're going to have a little bit of a different setup. We're going to squeeze the glutes so that you almost lock in the neutrality across the sacrum. And I say almost because you could lock in an imbalance, but really think about feeling balance left to right, and then squeeze the glutes, and then start with your head as low as you can get it. Glutes stay squeezed. It can be pretty easy to kind of deactivate as you lower. So think about glutes stay squeezed, and then lift yourself up until you feel the low back speak to you, and then just lower down until that deactivates. So we end up kind of reversing our way into Sphinx here, and we're maintaining that glute squeeze, which helps protect the lumbar, which allows us a little more spinal extension. And that glute squeeze can be 60, 70, 80, 90% of full potential. And we'll give ourselves just 20 more seconds here. Stay with that glute squeeze, even if it's a little bit more musculature engagement than you had expected or wanted to put in this morning. And then we'll relax just into something that feels good. You want your back, the lumbar, to really release here, right? We put it in some pretty deep space there, even if it didn't feel like it was the primary sensation. We use that glute squeeze to really get into the lumbar. And then we'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. Extend our legs out in front of us. And as the legs extend out in front of us, we're going to once again follow them forward into a fold. So we get back into that fold space. Give ourselves just about 30 more seconds here. We'll walk ourselves back to a vertical alignment. Let's reconnect with our prop friend. Unfold from shelf fold to towel length. And from towel length, we're going to create a roll that's headed over the ankles for a little supine external hip rotation with some support. Bilateral this time. We were unilateral the first and second time. And as you settle here, I want you to pay attention to how the lumbar is responding. So we've done external hip rotation, external hip rotation, external hip rotation, external hip rotation, and we're back in external hip rotation. But this time, we're also kind of incorporating some support. And so I want you to see if you can get the spine to just be at ease. We've been using musculature activation to support the hips here. Now we're just using the prop and just completely letting go. And the goal here is to get and this seems weird, the top of the lumbar spine, the bottom of the thoracic spine, so that thoracic joint, the soft tissue around that to relax. All the way from the bottom of the sacrum to the top of the lumbar spine, just completely at ease. And so in this same seaside village that Taylor lives, there lives this young fisherwoman. And she has this tiny little boat. And from the Taylor's window, he can see this woman every morning when she heads out to sea and every evening when she comes home with her catch. And through his frequent indecisions and frustrations, he will watch this woman rain, torrential wind, is that a thing? Horrendous wind, gale force winds, torrential downpours, coming to and from her boat, always with the gait of someone at full ease and a smile firmly planted across her face. And especially during the times when he is paralyzed with indecision as he frets back and forth between different lace frills in a catalog. He looks out and he sees her through this very envious lens. Her business certainly isn't more successful than his. But over the years, he watches her business grow, and he knows it's growing because she improves her boat. And then she gets an even bigger boat. And he sees the catch that she's bringing back grow and expand. And he sees that look on her face, that giant plastered smile, that ease and fluidity of her gait, never change, never shift. And so through that shop window, he watches her, both with envy and wonder. Thinking about if your spine is relaxing enough, if your spine is supported enough, where can you be more gentle with your breath? And we'll give ourselves about 50 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, we're going to bring our knees back to neutral. We can remove that blanket from our feet across the ankles, and let's take it up and we're going to place it underneath our neck. It shouldn't need to change. It may want to change, but it's very likely that you can get this in the neck space where you get the chin lifted, where you're not pushing the chin down towards your sternum, where you get that little extension, middle of the neck. And from here, we're going to try to play with the hip space. So knees bent, kneecaps towards the ceiling. We want to free up that space. And we're going to try to play with that hip space by mobilizing our shoulders. So shoulders and hips, super interconnected. Let's take the arms from cactus to kind of a wilted cactus. If you don't have the capacity to get the palms down here, lower the elbows towards the feet. If you can stay in that upright position, maybe think about tucking the hands underneath your sternum so that we end up with this big internal rotation of our shoulders, no matter where we are, right? We can be up on our fingertips, the hands can be down lower towards the hips, but we're staying internally rotated in the shoulders. And then we have this big, soft hip position with our knee bend and this nice extension position in our neck, opening up our throat. None of the adjustments you've made are prison sentences. So if anything feels like it's not working for you, move and adjust and find your way into something that allows ease. This particular shape won't be quite as long as the last few. We have about 40 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, you can release the arms. Use the arms to pull the prop out from underneath your head. Release into cactus if that feels appropriate for your arms, if that feels acceptable for your arms. We're going to walk the feet out to the width of the mat, let the knees fall in towards one another. If for any reason they don't connect easily at the midpoint, reconnect your body with your blanket and just place some type of a blanket prop in between the knees. We want rest here. We don't rest at the knees here, that medial line pressing together so that the supportive musculature is more or less forced into deactivation. That is our goal here. About 60 more seconds just to settle in. This is a shape in which you want to use your exhale to just continually relax and deactivate. Letting all of the musculature awareness turn into musculature softness. Eventually, we will let the knees come out to the width of the ankles and let the ankles walk in line with the hips. One last time, let's pull both thighs in towards our rib cage and give ourselves this little squeeze, little opportunity to kind of feel into the variance between the first and second time that we experienced this shape. And then the feet can come back down to the mat. And let's add some dynamic sway. So we explore our hip motion. And, I said it was going to be fairly hip heavy. It turned out being essentially exclusively hip centric. So as we move here, no judgment in how the hips feel, no judgment in if there is additional restriction or additional sensation. The movement here is just the opportunity to feel into what we've created thus far in our practice. Eventually, we're going to allow both knees to fall over towards the left. And as they do, we'll settle into a little static twist. One day our tailor is up very early. He's at the shop And he's absolutely agonizing over the new styles of garments he wants to create for next season, over which color palette he wants to lean into for next season. And he's thumbing through catalog page after catalog page after catalog page. Meanwhile, outside there is this horrendous storm. Just sheets and sheets of water pouring down and wind blowing so hard that sometimes that water is traveling horizontally. And streaks of water are just kind of rushing down his window. And he's inside, he's in this warm, cozy, comfortable shop. And as he's gazing out the window, he's thinking about what outfit he should put on the mannequin in the window that will catch the most attention. And he's agonizing between these three choices. Last 40 seconds here on this first static side. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. And we're going to re-find our dynamic sway, re-explore here with a little bit of asymmetry in our rotational capacity. And exploring just to figure out what feels good. Eventually, when it feels appropriate for you, we're going to let both knees fall. The second side, the right side. And we'll find that static hold there on side two. Just settling into that ease. Noting if there's variance between side one and side two. Not worrying about any variance, but noting it. Just 30 more seconds here on the second side. When it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. As we do so, we're just going to ask ourselves if there's anything we might want, need, desire, benefit from prior to Shavasana. If there is, we are going to offer that to ourselves now. And if we're ready for some stillness, we'll make our way into a shape where we can appreciate that. So as he's kind of tearing his hair out, thinking about which outfit should go on the mannequin, he sees through the window pane this young fisherwoman. And she's wearing like a yellow rain jacket and yellow rain boots. And she's like skipping and jumping in puddles. And he's just watching this torrential rain smash against her. And he just loses it. He flips out. He runs out of the shop. He's not wearing the appropriate clothes. So he gets outside and he's instantaneously drenched. He runs up to this woman. He's never spoken to her before. He says, "Hey." She turns around pretty startled. And he says, "I've been watching you walk by my shop for years. And you are always having such a good time. What's the deal?" And so when you are ready for some stillness, we'll find our way all the way into that. So she turns around pretty startled. She wasn't expecting someone to come out and yell a question at her. And she laughs a little bit. And she says, "Oh, what's the deal?" "Well, I don't have any secret. In the morning, I come down to my boat, I set sail, and I look out across the horizon. I have this dream to someday sail out beyond the horizon into the uncharted oceans, explore them. And so when I head out, I look at that horizon, and then the rest of the day, I make choices that will make that dream possible." We'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Into our wrists and our ankles, elbows and knees, shoulders and hips, neck, head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Entirety of the body moves, explores. And eventually, we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. And from that seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close as you settle in. With your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that when you keep your awareness on a distant horizon, the path to getting there is just as simple as making the right choices? Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Love the heck out of you. Have a beautiful rest of your week. I no class tomorrow night, so I'll see you next Sunday for a recharge. Love the heck out of you. Mwah!